With Tom Bradby.
Good evening. The warning on climate change today from the United Nations was as apocalyptic as the sight of wildfires raging across southern Europe in the past week. The era of global warming has ended, Secretary-General Antonio Guterres declared. The era of global boiling has begun. Climate change is here, he said, and it's terrifying. The air has become unbreathable. The heat is unbearable. Leaders must lead now. The science backs him. New research says this month will be the hottest there has ever been. And our very own Met Office predicted the record-breaking 40-degree temperatures of last summer will be considered cool by the end of the century.
The message doesn't get any starker.
Climate change is here, it is terrifying, and it is just the beginning.
Confirmation July is going to be the hottest month humans have ever recorded. And a warning from the UN, the wildfires in Europe and record-breaking temperatures in Asia and North America are a symptom of man-made warming which will threaten us all.
For the entire planet, it is a disaster. And for scientists, it is unequivocal. Humans are to blame. The era of global warming has ended. The era of global boiling has arrived.
Experts say without a change in human behaviour, we will have to adapt to extreme weather and high temperatures.
This is shocking, but it's not surprising. We've been looking at the way in which human influence is affecting our climate and average global temperatures for a long time now. So what we're seeing this July is absolutely in line with what we'd expect.
In the UK, the evidence now seems certain. Whilst temperatures fluctuate, the trend, shown here by the dotted line, is undeniably warming. 2022 was the hottest year in the UK since records began in 1884. Scientists say by 2060, those temperatures, which saw one day breach 40 degrees, will be the norm. And by the end of the century, a year like last year will be considered cool by comparison. A reminder, last summer wildfires destroyed homes, rising sea levels ramped up the rate of coastal erosion, and farmers battled with drought.
So this year we've planted 700 acres of sugar beet.
This farm in Suffolk is already adapting. A third of fields which used to grow thirsty crops like potatoes now grow sugar beet, which doesn't need irrigation.
The extremes are where we've faced the most difficulties. You know, one moment we get 50 mil, 2 inches of rain, and then we don't get anything for 3 or 4 months. So that's the real challenge.
On the coast, near a cliff crumbling due to erosion, Chloe is more focused on her castle than the climate. Whilst she enjoys the present, her nan worries about the future.
I think we've made a little bit of a mess of the world, and it'll be down to their generation to try and sort it all out.
Do you feel bad about that?
Yes, really bad.
The UN says action is needed imminently, as the era of global boiling has already begun.
And I'm joined by Martin and Anushka to talk about all this. Martin, can I start with you? It really felt like today was, I mean, like we've had these warnings so many times before, haven't we? But this felt like a big step change today, which I guess you would say is a reflection of the facts as we're seeing them unfolding.
Yeah, I think so, and partly fueled by the kind of the visceral images of those wildfires we're seeing right across the globe at the moment. But they only tell part of the story, because aside from the fires, which look great on TV news packages and we can associate with because we may have been to some of those places on holiday, you've got almost record levels of polar ice melting. You've got a marine heat wave seeing unprecedented ocean temperatures. You've got sea level rises increasing across the board. And all this is happening at a time when, whilst in this country we are lowering the amount of fossil fuels we're using, if you look across the globe, this year we are using more coal and oil, than we've ever used before. And there is a disconnect, actually, between what the public want, it appears, and what they think of what the leaders are doing about it. So a poll out today found that 77% of people said, we are really worried about climate change, but only 26% of the population thought the government here was doing enough about it, and very few more than that thought that Labour would do any better of a job. So there is a clamour for more to be done, but it's a very difficult and a global challenge that we face.
Anushka, given all that, given the lack of confidence, given the dire nature of the warnings, I'm assuming the government had a lot to say about these comments today.
You would think so, wouldn't you, Tom? But no, actually, critics might say there's been a bit of a deafening silence. I haven't heard anything directly from the Prime Minister, including on his social media, or from the Secretary of State in charge of climate. Grant Shapps tweets a lot, but his last tweet was actually about NatWest. Now, I went to the government tonight and I asked specifically for a response, and I have had one from a government spokesperson that talked about our net zero record and how proud they are of it. But interestingly, they also said that the number one concern right now for families is the cost of living challenge, and that they want to protect people from having increased costs as a result of the net zero effort. And I think in many ways that bit of the statement sort of frames where we are politically and where we have been since the Uxbridge by-election, when the Tories kept the seat because they argued against an environmental policy, ULEZ, that was going to hit people in the pocket. What's happened now is that those who are sceptical about spending a lot of money on net zero on the Tory backbenches have had their voices amplified. They're fighting hard against certain measures that they don't agree with. They want secretaries of state to have to, before anything else, make sure things don't hit people in the pocket. But on the other hand, there are lots of Conservative MPs who care a lot about net zero and who talk about the polls that Martin's just mentioned, about how much people care about this.
OK, let's see how that unfolds in the days ahead. But both of you, thank you very much indeed. Well, just going back to that speech by the United Nations Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, also had strong words for what he called the unacceptable level of fossil fuel profits. Well, British Gas announced theirs today. It seems the company hasn't just got President Putin's invasion of Ukraine to thank for its latest staggering figure, but the energy regulator Ofgem too. It made nearly £1 billion between January and June, up tenfold. Awkward. £500 million came from Ofgem, pushing up the price cap to allow British Gas and other energy suppliers to charge more to recoup earlier losses.
Bumper profits for energy suppliers at a time when energy bills continue to cause hardship. It's enough to make blood boil. Tabani Sitole is with British Gas. She's spending almost twice as much on gas and electricity as she was a year ago, despite taxpayer support and cutting her consumption.
It's unfair, very unfair. They've got big profits which are not being shared with us customers, especially us pensioners who are struggling.